Welcome to the Center Podcast by City to City LA. We got the whole crew here. Sean is here. Kimy is here.
Yes.
Brock is here. Josh is here. The whole house is full. Kimy, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
You may or may not know this, but you're the first guest on the Center Pod.
Wow, I did not know that.
So I wish we had like sound effects because I'll give you a clap right now.
I'm on
Yeah,
my
little clap.
We gotta get sound effects.
Somebody got to break something. Yeah.
We're excited. So Kimy, thank you for being here with us. You are actually one of my favorite leaders in this region. Just as I've like observed the work you do at Light and Life and just in the various capacities that you work, like on doing student ministry, all type of stuff. So I'm excited to really just chop it up with you today and hear kind of what God is doing in your life and through your life. So Sean, man, I don't know if you want to kick it off just with some thoughts or some questions for Kimy.
Yeah, I think, Kimy, one of the things that I see, we talked a little bit about in our intro episode, the difference between like a pontificator and a practitioner. Mm-hmm. And so we want to bring in practitioners on this podcast. And in a way that I see you as a practitioner is discipling and developing next-gen leaders around gospel-centered teaching. I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk specifically about a paradigm that I've kind of pastored you into. We call it the three ships. Yeah. We got the Queen Mary in Long Beach, so we got to make it about ships, right? But I also want to talk just a little bit about your journey. I mean, God has kind of brought you into this space where you have a love for campus ministry.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit, like, how did you get there? Like, how did God direct and lead you to campus ministry?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'll kind of start with my story of going to Long Beach City College, which was a beautiful time. When I look back, I remember how frustrated I was to be there because I wanted to just go right into school for ministry. I wanted to just jump in and just develop my skills that way. But God had a different plan. And I remember it was my first semester at Long Beach City College, and I was sitting on a bench, and there was a girl next to me, and she was sharing. I won't put her business out there on the podcast, but she was sharing about some personal struggles that she was experiencing. Yeah. And my heart went out for her because I thought to myself, why isn't there a safe space for her to have this conversation? And it would be weird if a stranger turned around and just said, Jesus is the answer. Right. And she's like, I didn't ask you. So
you didn't have your megaphone, nothing like that? Okay.
No big sign about skinny jeans and all of those things.
Right.
But what I did have was just this compassion and this insight into the fact that there was not a safe space on campus. And so I remember sitting there and just asking the Lord, like, what do we do in that situation? We had a conversation, and the Lord was kind of stirring campus ministry through our conversation. And so from there, we just created a safe space. And we said, we are outside because we have nothing to hide. It's kind of like a catchphrase. We're outside because we have nothing to hide. And so we did our campus ministry on the lawn. We did worship. We had Bible studies. People would randomly walk up and just say, I felt like God called me here. Yeah. Okay, join us, right? And so we'd have great conversations. People would walk by and hear the worship and just ask, are you guys like a music group? What's going on? And I think we saw probably somewhere around 500 people touched by that ministry throughout the time that we were there for about 6 years.
Wow. So, in Center Church, which is a book we kind of draw our incubator planters through, Tim Keller talks about this idea of like a theology for the city. And one of the questions that's always stirred in me is like, where is the gospel moving in your city? Yeah. And you're saying that God was leading you to that campus as, hey, come create a space here because the gospel is moving here. Now, part of what we found on that campus, part of the whole like, we're outside, we got nothing to hide, was we found cults on campus. We found people with a false gospel. And then God began to open a door. We actually found that one of our church plants, the student ministry leader that was on campus, she was helping with like ASB, doing some of that stuff. She was at one of our church plants. And she's like, I've been praying that God would send somebody on campus. Yeah. Wow. So then that really caused us to do some research around like, I would say it like this, Lance. I think it could be a little bit of a stretch, but I believe that community colleges are the lost people group of the United States. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that like a lot of people aren't thinking about community colleges specifically for ministry and evangelism. Cults are. But a lot of churches aren't. And part of the reason is the high turnover. But what we found is like when we started doing research, there are 36,000 students at Long Beach City College between two campuses. Yep. and thinking about there are no churches engaged with that, no crew, no YFC, no FCA. Now they're at the four-year universities, they're at the high schools, but a lot of these kids through the Promise program in Long Beach are going 1 year at LBCC. Why are we not hitting them with the gospel while they're there?
Yeah.
And so God began to send Kimy on mission for that and develop a love and a heart for that.
Yeah.
So then you started developing leaders. You know, Lance talks about the discipleship matrix a lot. And we've been taught that even by Larry Acosta, who leads City to City. You began to lead the people to your left and right in that, and sharing the gospel, teaching, guiding people. Actually, our worship pastor came out of that ministry here at the church.
Yeah.
So then you get through that, right? And now you're trying to learn, like, okay, this is where the gospel is moving. These things are happening.
Yeah.
How do you begin to live out sharing the gospel? Like, we know we're not trying to systematize everything. You know, the 4 spiritual laws of Kimy and what she did at LBCC. That's not what we're trying to say. No. But like, what was the system that we came up with? We talk about this 3 ships. Yes. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. So the 3 ships, it's fellowship, mentorship, and discipleship.
Okay.
Right? So ships, the end of the word, right? Fellowship, mentorship, and discipleship. Okay. So what we found was really important was that young leaders need fellowship. They need Christian community. Yeah. They need people who aren't just going to tell them what to do, but live life with them.
Wow.
Right? Which leads into discipleship. When somebody is walking with you, life on life discipleship, it's more than just, hey, meet me for an hour for coffee. Let's do a Bible study and I'll answer some questions. And it becomes more about what's going on in your real life, and what's going on in my life, because discipleship happens both ways. You're not always just discipling somebody, but the person you disciple ends up discipling you sometimes, right? Into a greater understanding of the gospel, because we're all created in God's image. And then lastly, about mentorship. So one thing that we kind of discussed too is like there's a difference between discipleship and mentorship. And some people mistake those 2 things.
Okay.
Because discipleship is helping somebody walk on the path that God has created for them, right? Helping them understand more about Jesus and walking this Christian life. Usually you disciple somebody who admires your Christian walk, right? But mentorship is a lot more about, hey, I love what you do for God. I want to learn more about that. I had a young person tell me one time, I want to be a youth pastor. Can you tell me how to be a youth pastor? I was like, where do we start with that?
Yeah. Wow.
But that's mentorship. Let me sit down with you and talk with you about the path that God has created for me, specifically my gifting and my office, and maybe where God would be calling you. So that's a little bit of the difference there. And those are the 3 ships that we talk about.
That's good, Kimy. I'm listening to you. You know, y'all was outside. We outside, right? You guys are outside with nothing to hide.
Yes.
It really captured me to hear you say you're entering in a JUCO community college and you're looking to do ministry. When I think of my freshman year of college, I was nowhere near trying to do ministry.
Right.
The type of outside that I was outside was not was not what you were doing. So the question that comes to mind for me is how did you arrive at the place of saying, hey, here I am at 18, 19, however old you were, entering into college with a passion to do ministry, right? Where many young people, they are leaving the nest, if you will, or they have more freedom, their first car, their first job, and they say, I want to party. I want to go experience maybe some of the negative things that life has to offer. What put you on the path to say, no, I feel a call to ministry. I want to serve these young people who maybe have questions or who are struggling with life. What kind of helped you get there?
Yeah. I was actually thinking about this recently, but I remember when I was a kid, I had friends who were younger than me, older than me, and then my same age. So I would hang out with a 5-year-old when I was in 3rd grade, but I would also hang out with a 6th grader, and it was super weird. But part of my life that God has given me, my personality, some of those things was kind of developing that over time. But what I will say is that it would have been easy for me to walk away from the church, given all the hurt that I had been through. It would have been easy for me to walk away from ministry, given some of the things that I didn't understand. I thought, growing up, I thought ministry was leading worship on a stage with bright lights. People clapping and telling you great job, and then you go in the green room for the rest of the service. That's what I thought ministry was.
Wow.
And as I was discipled and mentored by Sean, as well as my sister, most of that was, Kimy, how has God created you? And what has he created you to do? And so I had an understanding of what God had made me for. What was my purpose? What was my unique purpose on this earth? Because at 13, I was being discipled. And so it starts younger than we think it does. It's not just, hey, you're 18. I hope God gives you a call for ministry. But it starts when they're 13, 14, 15, 16. And God really spoke to me when I was 13 after an assessment I had taken. I think it was StrengthsFinder. Mm-hmm. And I went home and I was like, I'm an activator. I think strategically. And for some reason, God was using that to talk to me a little bit about these weird quirks that I thought I had. But God was like, I gave that to you, and now you need to use it. So as I grew a little bit longer in my faith walk, I just kept seeing, God, this is not just for me, but you want other people to feel this. Yeah. So the story that God was writing in my life, it was a similar story God wanted to write in others. Yeah. To develop them from a young age and be able to speak to them and tell them, I have a purpose for you and a plan for you. That's the number one question on people's minds, especially in middle school and high school. What's my purpose? Wow. What was I created for? What am I supposed to do with this life? And so somebody walking alongside of me when I was younger to say, hey, God does have a purpose for you. Let's discover that together. That's really what set me on that path for a long time.
One of the things that I wish I had, Lance, that I felt like God really stirred me to invest this way into Kimy, that she's investing into others, was fellowship with leaders outside of the church. Yeah. Like, I want to see your character. I want to see your integrity. I want to see how you treat your wife. Yeah. How do you go grocery shopping? What's different about you as a Christian leader when you go get gas? You know what I mean? And I think in that living that way, what I decided was that everything I was going to do, if it was going to be gospel-centered, was going to be relational, because that's the way Jesus lived. And if I'm going to live out these chapters of the gospel that Tim Keller talks about, then it's not just repent and believe, but what's in between that? How am I living? And the way I would say it to a lot of our young disciples, and I think maybe we could talk about the importance of like why developed leaders need to spend time with undeveloped leaders outside the church and invite them into their life, is I think churches do a very good job of teaching people about Jesus. Most churches, especially churches that know the gospel. Yeah. But there's a difference between knowing and living the gospel. Yeah. Yeah. And my concern is we do a really good job teaching people about what Jesus did, but not what Jesus is asking them to do. Yeah. And what I saw with Kimy was God asking her to do something that I didn't know how to do. And my question was, God, how can we do this together by your strength and your power? Because the gospel is moving here. How can I spend time with these young people? They can grow me, and I can give whatever I have to them. Yeah. If I'm going to be honest, I think the leaders that are listening to this might start thinking, as a developed leader, how am I fellowshipping before even mentoring and discipling? Yeah. How am I earning the right to speak into lives and then helping these young people understand who they are in Jesus? Not just who I am, not just who Jesus was, but who is Jesus asking you to be? Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts around that idea, Lance?
Yeah, well, as I'm hearing you all talk, I'm thinking of this divide between the secular and the sacred, and how we consider ministry, like you said, Kimy, to be what happens on stage. And I don't think that's what Jesus modeled at all, right? No. When he met Peter, he calls him to be his disciple. He doesn't preach a sermon. He says, Peter, let's get on a boat, right? The first major miracle Jesus does is not at an altar, it's at a wedding, right? Just this kind of mundane moment in his life that he uses to show others kind of how God works. And I think that's what you all are challenging us to consider is before, we take these other steps into ministry, let's do life together. Yeah. Let's fellowship. Let me show you how I shop, how I engage with people in the community. And Kimy, I think that's huge with building trust, particularly with young people, which is sounds to me like what God has put on your heart in this season, or who He's put on your heart in the season to minister to. But I do wonder, in this cultural moment, it seems that the church can seem almost like hostile to what young people think are acceptable or kind of the lifestyle they want to live. They feel like, I don't know if the church is a safe space for me. Yeah. And I want to keep my peace, right? So how do you deal with fellowshipping, mentorship, fellowship, and discipleship? It's a whole lot of ship going on. How do you deal with all of those ships and still allow these young people space to explore who they are? Great question. And kind of process what they believe while you're still walking with them on those three ships?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think it does start with a non-judgmental, unbiased moment of just saying, like, what is your story? Who are you? And you have to start there because there is no fellowship unless you're getting to know somebody else, right? And I would say one thing that the church can work in and grow in is an asking of what's your story without saying, what are you wearing? Or why did you come in like that?
That's good.
Right? Because that religiosity that comes from, people who've been in church for a long time.
Sure.
That turns people off from the gospel, from God, from, coming into the church and trying to learn and grow. And so I would say that's the first step. But one thing that I do is a lot of times, because we do have to earn the right to be heard, I will ask a select group of questions, right? What's your story? What are you struggling with? What's something that you feel like God has done in your life? A lot of young people haven't even identified that. We'll start to talk through those things, and that's when stuff comes up. That's when they start to ask questions. Hey, I'm feeling like this about my sexuality, and I haven't ever felt like I could talk to anybody about it.
Wow.
Okay, now we can have a conversation, but I can't walk up to you and ask you about your sexuality. That's not going to go over well, right?
Right.
So a lot of it starts in question asking. Jesus asked a lot of questions, and he did a lot of teaching, but he asked a lot of questions of people so that trust would be built. And so I would say first, asking questions, getting to know them, allowing them to ask their questions, and meeting it with compassion and empathy. Those are two big things that unfortunately sometimes we struggle with as leaders because we want to give them the right answer so they can be on the right path quickly. We want to just like get them there fast, but the point of discipleship, the point of fellowship, the point of mentorship is, where is God taking you in his timing?
Wow.
Right? So let's talk through that.
That's good. Sean, I have a question for you. Kimy is kind of living out this model, this 3-ship model, and you've went through the process with her, and now she's going through the process with others. And just kind of what I've observed through the years of walking alongside you all, doing ministry alongside you all, is that it's real impact happening. And I think that it's great how God uses us, how God also reproduces us in many ways. But I want to ask you in particular, because you've been doing it maybe a little longer than Kimy has, what has been some of the pain you've experienced in the process of doing this? Of, walking out those 3 ships, trying to raise up people. Maybe you tried to raise up another Kimy and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Or, there's many things that happen on the journey. So I just want to hear from you, man. What does that look like for you? And what's the process been?
Yeah, so I'll start out with what Kimy was saying. One of my mentors would say it to me this way: if you want to be a great preacher, you got to tell great stories. If you want to be a great shepherd, you have to ask great questions. Because a doctor will prescribe something wrong without asking questions. I would say the first hurt that I experienced was I tried to prescribe without describing. I would try to decide for people what they needed, and that was a hard learning process because I think I extended someone's journey that didn't need to be extended. I felt a lot like Moses in a lot of moments. And then I think the second thing that is hard, and I think we need to be honest about, is people choose to change. You can't make people change. So you could give them the right medicine. You could give them the right plan. You give them everything that is necessary to live a gospel-centered, flourishing life in Christ, and they could choose to reject that. I'll tell a quick story. There was a young leader, a lot like Kimy, very similar gifts, young man, and graduated from Valley High School, Christian high school, and star running back, still hold records, just incredible evangelist, like his incredible evangelist. And he had a severe anger issue, and I could see it pop up. And God kept leading me to say, this is the medicine that you need to deal with this, because this will become rage. Through allowing that anger to sit, he rejected the mentorship and discipleship that the Lord was bringing him. He began to hide in a very large church, pretend like he was following Jesus. He one day decided he wanted to be a police officer, and they wrote me a letter of recommendation saying, hey, would you sign off on him being an officer? And I said, I got to be real with you. Like, as somebody that's seen this, you should never give this man a gun, ever. He struggles with anger, struggles with rage. This is not going to go well. Refused counseling, refused the medicine. I just saw it over and over again, Lance. And one day, you know, the anger got a hold of him. He came home and he killed himself and his wife. Wow. 2 young kids that his parents are now raising. And so for every discipleship, mentorship, fellowship, success story, there's somebody who gets all of it and chooses to do nothing with it. And that's what's so hard about being a Christian leader is the gospel is real and Jesus is alive. And these people can flourish in their lives, but they have to make the choice to do it. Yeah. And I would tell the leaders that are listening, you're going to have those pain stories because people are people and they choose to either accept or reject Jesus. That's part of the truth of them receiving or denying the gospel.
Yeah, that's good, man. Thank you for sharing that. Just thinking of Moses, you mentioned Moses. He had Aaron walking alongside him, Joshua coming behind him, and the whole time he had warfare happening. So I think that, to your point, we have to be prepared for the warfare that's going to happen in the process.
Yeah.
And just stay centered in that gospel, right? That, Lord, you're with me, you're with them, and I'm not God, you are.
Yes.
So it's my job to maybe plant, or it's my job to maybe water.
Yeah.
But Lord, you at the increase.
That's it.
So that's good, man. We're kind of coming to the close of our time. But Kimy, I just wanted to ask you as we close, for any emerging leaders who are maybe thinking about offering these 3 ships to somebody. Yeah. I want to walk with you in mentorship, in discipleship, in fellowship. Do you have an encouragement, right? We have leaders who are part of our learning communities who are maybe a couple of years away from planting a church. We have people who are meeting with core teams. We have people who are maybe just thinking about stepping into being a faith leader. Just an encouragement for somebody that's going to be walking with people, that's going to be leading, going to experience those battle wounds.
Yeah.
What would your encouragement to them be?
Yeah, I would say always, always, always. We know this as leaders, but start with prayer because you do not see what God sees. You don't. And in the time that I've been able to walk this road, I've seen how God has shown me people I would have never, ever thought would be the leaders that they are today. And so start with prayer. Ask the Lord, God, show me, put names in my mind, give me dreams, give me visions, bring them up, let them ask questions. And that's where you really start. I would also say, if you feel like you're struggling with empathizing with this the young generation that's coming up, that's a problem that we face sometimes. If you feel like you're struggling with that, ask the Lord to give you a heart of compassion. Yeah. Look into culture. Ask people questions about, why does this generation talk like this, dress like this, act like this? You'll find out things you have no idea why. You'll understand more about this generation that's the most depressed, the most anxious, dealing with the most social anxiety. And you'll understand with a heart of compassion why God loves them so much. And so I would say pray, ask God for those leaders, understand this generation better by asking questions. And lastly, walk the road slowly. Don't try to create leaders quickly. Similar to Sean's story, I had a young person that I was like, you're ready. Let's, get you in ministry. You just graduated high school, but come on, you've been in the church forever. And she just fell off from church because there was so much pressure on her to become somebody that she just wasn't yet. Wow. And so don't rush the process. Let God do it. And those are my 3 encouragements.
That's good. Thank you, Kimy. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being with us here on the Centered Pod. I learned so much just from you all's relationship. Kimy, watching you lead. I've got to sit in on some of the things that Light and Life does here and how you just lead with such excellence and care, man. So I'm excited to not only see what God is doing in your life, but the leaders that you're raising up. And this was good stuff. Yeah. So I want to encourage all those that are tuned in to remain centered in the gospel. We are City to City LA. Yeah. And thanks for checking out the pod. We'll see y'all on the next episode.